we left off talking about Matisse. We want to wrap it up today. We're not going to wrap it up per se because Matisse has a career that lasts all the way till 40s and 50s, and really is an important artist in the 20th century. But we're going to wrap up Fauvism today, the Fauvist part of it, right? And we were looking at the painting on your left, which comes from a poem by Baudelaire, luxury, calmness, and sensuality or exoticism. That there is nothing but these three things, right? There's nothing but order and beauty, comma, richness, calm, and sensuality. Luxuriety, calmness, voluptuousness. And the theme is personified by Matisse, not by Baudelaire, but by Matisse, as these women lounging and out to lunch on the side of the Mediterranean in Saint-Tropez, which is exactly where he painted this. And he's been working with this pointillist thing, idiom, that was larger than mosaic patches that Duran picked up on. And using themes that had a very, very long tradition in the history of art. And Cézanne's Battle of Love is just one of many touchstones for Matisse. Cézanne did a number of these bathers, which were intended to be symbols of sort of primal nature, maybe, as much as anything, right? The idea that sort of going back to something that is absolutely, where we are still firmly attuned and rooted in nature. And certainly the Battle of Love ties into that on a certain level. And again, even further down, when we're talking about further back in Titian, and the myth of Actaeon, the hunter, who happens upon the goddess of the hunt, Diana, and she has him eaten alive by his own dogs. Even if we go back for a second, right? Even I don't know sure if it's a dog in the sky, but the dogs that are here may have everything to do with Diana and Actaeon as well. With that myth. So Cézanne's even sort of picking up on it and twisting it into something modern. He doesn't want it to be Diana and Actaeon, but there are these reference points there, and that's true for Matisse, I think, to a certain degree as well, where we have become Actaeon. We have become the hunter who happened upon the goddess of the hunt, caught up the bath with her young maidens, and accidentally seeing them as close to nature as you can be. I say so jokingly, right? Very, very close to nature. Now, the reason I wanted to go back over that was because, Invitation au Voyage, that's the name of the poem. The reason I wanted to go back over that was that the next year, in the year of the Fauves, he picks up that theme again, sort of, frolicking in nature in your birthday suit. In what was, at this time, his absolute biggest picture he'd ever painted. So when we see artists all of a sudden pulling out all the stops and painting something that is larger than anything they've ever done before, that's usually a good sign that they want you to sit up and take notice of this. They're going to do something here. And maybe they're sort of laying it down and they're saying, this is the law. This is important. This is big. And making a statement with it, right? And you can see the difference here, of course, is that he's changed his color scheme closer to what we saw with the other works. In fact, this one was put up right after the Fauve show, the big Fauve show in Hopard, and he said he didn't like the way the pointless stuff got lost, and so those are gone now. And instead we have much larger patches, isn't the right word, fields of color that vary somewhat within the field, but still have some of the same elements we saw during the Fauve show, such as those odd, inexplicable outlines to some of the figures that aren't about observation, but are about composition. Right? So the green and the red that outlines the figures in the middle, which is interesting. I don't know, have you ever noticed that when you stare at something, and sometimes my glasses do this. When I stare at a light, like one side of the light will be blue and the other side will be red. Have you ever seen that happen? When you get polar, sometimes that will happen. You get a really bright light, and out of the corner of my glasses, I'll get that sort of spectral burn, not a burn, but you see the spectrum around it. And that's, I wonder if that's what he's doing there with those two figures in the middle, where you have that green and red around the side. But I don't know how you would know that, or if you did know that, or what. I just sort of struck me right now. I should stop with these asides because that's what slows us down. Yeah, exactly. And I know that it keeps more glasses as well. So, but whether or not that's because you have polarization over those or not, I don't know. Right? But anyway, he's removed the pointless colors. He's still got the color, right? But he's removed the pointless technique in order to get these more simplified colors. He's multiplied the number of figures, and at the same time, I think he's kind of simplified them. Most of them don't have any chiaroscuro molding, so this is again the lesson of focus, and is to get away from that idea of rendering objects as if they were three-dimensional, and get back to that as the inspiration for a sort of a color composition, right? And like I said, it's the biggest thing we've ever done to date, so we should listen, as it were. We should sit up and take note. And here it is. It's up until it's off in the Barnes question. Give you a bit of a scale. For the longest time, the Barnes did not allow photographs, and so almost he couldn't talk about this work, even though I think he sees it as a visual manifesto of everything he's trying to do at this point. And we know from looking back at what survived of his output, he worked out every one of the figures here independently and thoroughly before finishing the composition. So he's really putting a ton of work into this. And this is, in many ways, this is anti-impressionism, right? Where you work directly in front of nature, trying to capture a fleeting moment of light. For him, it's nothing to do with that. It's impressionist colors, heightened somewhat, much more expressive than that, but the interest is in what it means and sort of the process of working it through. That he's imbuing each one of these figures with something incredibly deep. And he doesn't want to sort of rest and put it down there quickly. He wants to make sure he gets everything sort of just right. And so in many ways, a lot of people look at the Joy of Life as being a visual manifesto for everything that he wants art to be. Counts and figures he'd been using even before the Vogue movement, in terms of summing up his ideas. And as we look at it, and look at the individual figures that are here, we're going to find that really what he's doing with this painting is he's summing up the history of art in one work of art. He's summing up everything that's ever happened in art. From the moment that we as human beings started scratching on cave walls. And in fact, if you look at the figures and their simplicity, their reliance on heavy-handed outlines without any chiaroscuro fill, you start to think back to the Cave of the Bulls and things like that at Lascaux. Some of the earliest paintings that he ever made. But that said, it's also just rife with art historical references that he has tweaked and transformed and reinserted into this landscape. I think we could spend days going through all of them. What I did is I sort of put together the ones that I just sort of hit me that there's that. You know, that was obviously in relation to this, but this is not enough to be exhaustive by any means. But just to give you an idea of how important the poses were to the piece, and how when he's looking at these different figures, what he's seeing is that eternity of humankind. Right? Everything that we've ever done, everything that's ever happened to us, from the dawn of man to now, is, I think, intended to be wrapped up inside this image. It's the most important thing he's done up until this point in his life. Right? So let's take a look at some of these. Right? Trying. There we are. You can see, for example, that the woman on the left, with her arms up and the flowers coming down, and with her hands in her hair, can be traced back through a series of Greek images, particularly Hellenistic Greek images, of Venus coming out of the bath, tying up her hair or wringing out her hair after coming out of the bath. And we've got numerous examples of this Hellenistic Venus type, who emerges from the bath. And that again ties right back to this idea of Diana at the bath, right? We're seeing them emerge from this communion with nature. And the pose is very similar, the arm position is very similar. Matisse has done his art history, if you will, and he's come up with a modern version of that. Again, we'll start talking toward the end of this about why he's doing all of this, why is he doing all these images in, but I think, again, he wants to see that human experience is connected, and that there's a modern connection to these things from the past that doesn't necessarily reflect them exactly, but has a connection. Go through the Renaissance. I can show you Titian pictures of the same image, and into the 19th century, that's Eng, early 19th century painter. In fact, it's really similar, isn't it? There, and then what's interesting about this is the fact that Matisse seems to have loved Eng. At one point, he thought it was 1906 or 7. One of the galleries, I can't remember which one, in Paris, put Eng's Sleeping Odalisque, the one on the blue background, right, with the back to you, put it right next to the Manet Olympia, right, the prostitute with the band on her neck. And he said, I like the Eng better. Right? And I think it's because Eng, also being a neoclassicist, has that sense of a connection back to this mythical past that Matisse wants to get as well, that Matisse wants to follow too. The figure that's in repose in the middle goes back to a very famous statue of a sleeping hermaphrodite. This figure, you walk around the other side, it looks like a woman and it has breasts and broad hips, but also a penis. It's the offspring of Hermes and Venus, Aphrodite, and it's again a figure of classical mythology that he is now finding a contemporary reference for. So everything kind of goes back to Greek myth as it's known through sculpture. And again, these things don't just exist; they trace through time, right? These things that he's picking up. This is a Velázquez from the 17th century. You might remember it from Las Meninas, right? But again, obviously, he's been looking probably at the same sculpture and doing his variant. And Matisse is now picking up on these things, right? Pulling them together and saying, okay, my art is not isolated, but really is doing modern versions of these. And for him, the reason to draw these lines is that it's about being a human being, right? It's about being alive. It's about the joy of life is art, right? And he's seeking that and pulling that in. But what's great is that he's never, he doesn't do a sort of a boring quote. You know what I mean? He doesn't just insert the figure there. He manipulates it for his purposes. But, so that you look at how the paint is painted in there, but how the hair becomes into sort of flowers, right? And how the areas on the shoulders turn into this wonderful sort of amorphous form that almost stops looking like a human body as you look around the shoulders of that redhead. Another one here, the other reclining figure, with the one arm behind the head goes back to famous images of Ariadne. She was the one who helped Theseus defeat the Minotaur, and then he abandoned her on his way back to Athens because he fell in love with his little sister. Right. But nonetheless, she wound up sort of living her days on an island with Dionysus, the god of wine, and is almost always shown in a sort of half-drunken sleep. Right? And Matisse has picked that up as well. Again, not directly, right? He's manipulating around, but the way her legs are crossed in akimbo. And again, the arm behind the head becomes this reference point, right? That this is now meant to be a certain reference to Ariadne. And he's not the only one who's ever done this. I mean, goodness knows, he's sort of got walking Baltimore, another man who he loves, right? But and you'll notice, by the way, that these figures are languishing as music is being played as well. There's a pipe player in the right middle ground there, and another one right in the foreground. So there is a connection to music, and in this case, another odalisque figure being serenaded by her musician with the consort in the back, the guard in the back. And again, a reference to the back there, too. water behind. So Matisse is really savvy at pulling all these different things together. It's a reference-heavy work. And with its scale, you're meant to sort of contemplate this. And I think he assumes that we're an intelligent audience that can pick up these different references and to know that he's pulling these things in. And by doing so, he wants you to think not just about the composition itself, but also about what it all means. And it means that within the composition itself, but also for us as people. And I just wanted to bring some other things as well in. The idea of the pipe players and the idea of these languishing figures with their arms over their heads being serenaded is something we can find on Greek pottery as well. I think he absolutely adores Greek pottery as much as the sculptures themselves, because you'll notice that one of the things that happens with red figure pots, or even black figure for that matter, is you get the same sort of outline with a flat tone. That isn't particularly naturalistic, right? That alters your perception of the figure. So our figure in the center of this pot, with the pipe player serenading him, is very similar in many ways to the way Matisse treats figures. Right? That what we get inside the human figure is just the simplest of lines. And that simplicity of design, that rhythm that was achieved with it, is something that Matisse is trying to bring to his works as well. Another pipe player back here with sheep, and again, we have numerous references throughout. One can also think perhaps of the myth of Orpheus, the Greek shepherd Orpheus, who charmed the animals with his songs. And that, I think, is something that he's trying to pull in here as well. But both those sheep end up looking sort of like cave paintings as well, the way they're so simplified, and how the horns are spread apart so that you can see them more clearly, and how there's a sense that they sort of disappear into the background, much like what we see with old cave paintings, because they through time have faded. It's like it's everything that man has ever done when it comes to art is here, one way or another. That popped out of the Dunbar Ghost collection in Georgetown, so I bring it in again for these references of the different fluting figures that he has. And these flutists, naked satyr there with Dionysus, are often accompanying figures who are going through processions or dancing as well. And you'll notice that in the back of the figures, that group dancing in a circle. So we have music and dance and art, all the joy of life. And, typical for me, I oversold it, but I have a great new picture that goes in a row. Sorry, but rarely do we see an erect one in our classes here because it's a Catholic institution, but there's another face playing and enjoying himself only too much in doing so. But the teacher's picking up on these things, and bringing them in. That there is, I think, an erotic overtone to these that we shouldn't entirely ignore. And if we think about the two figures that are in the lower right foreground embracing with their heads together, first the pose is something I think was very similar to the famous drunken satyr in Berlin with the journal post. He's transposed the gender on it. But also, Matisse, as we'll find out eventually, studied under Rodin for a bit, spent some time in Rodin's sculpture studio, learning how to sculpt as well. He's a terrific sculptor, Matisse. But that's where he started his career, and this image of the kiss is also, I think, bears some similarity. These two figures that have melded into each other. And not in a frightening way, not in a sort of a zombie or vampire sort of way, but in a sort of melding together in harmony. So, again, it's just references everywhere we go. And then I think finally those dancing figures in the back and the way that they're spinning around with their arms joined. In a circle like this reminds me of things I've seen on lots of Greek pots where the outside of the pot is decorated by figures moving in a circle. This one's in the Walters Museum, and even though it's warriors running a race with their helmets, they give you the same sense of dance and freedom and frolicking that Matisse has. And here's another one with a dance moving around the outside of one of these Greek vases, right? So, again, it's everything we've ever done. Oh, right. Okay, overselling the case, right? Botticelli from the Renaissance gives us these ideas of spinning. Is that one you were thinking of as well? Yeah. So there's the three graces there with their arms together, right? Spinning around. And the sense that music is in the air. And then also the verdant nature of the landscape itself is something that Matisse is pulling into. So all of these works, right? And this is just, again, I'm just barely skimming the surface here, even though it feels like we've been on forever, right? This is just barely skimming the surface of the reference-heavy nature of this work and how important it is to Matisse as a sort of a doctrine of what art is all about. Art is a marriage of all things harmonious, music and dance. Art is a reflection of the human condition, going back to the dawn of time and traceable through everything we've ever put our hands to as humans. He's seeing a connection there, right? A connection that is, when we talk about humanism, that's what we're really talking about, isn't it? Something that transcends individualism, something that makes us all one person. And what we'll find is, throughout the course of this semester, is that that's something that modern artists are often looking for. What is the glue that holds us together as people? Because politics will screw you up, you know? The social structures that we often look at to develop community and a sense of a group identity, none of them work. All of them have their problems, but there's something else that makes us people. It makes us love each other, and Matisse is there, right? Matisse is after that. And even early in his career, you'll see throughout the rest of his career he was too old to go into the war, World War I in 1914, right? He just stays in Paris and he paints the most amazingly harmonious, peaceful scenes you'll ever see in your life. Because the world is screwed, I'm doing this, you know. Let the politics and the military kill each other, right? I'm going to find what's great about being human when everybody else is looking at what's bad about it. So none of that's going on yet. The world isn't going to shit yet. But he's already on that track that we'll see develop through the rest of his career. What's coming up next? There it is. Our wonderful dance. Finding that moment of dance through it all. Now, very, very quickly, and then we will move over to Germany, where things are a little bit less pleasant, thematically at least. As if to prove how important the joy of life was to him, Matisse reworked quite a few of the figures in it, even after he was done, right? He worked on most of them prior to the composition, and he keeps working with them afterwards. And I think this is just a testament to how terribly important this was to him, how kinds of meaning he's seeing in the forms that he's finally chosen. This is something that other artists have done. Gauguin is a great example. He collected Gauguin. And the figure that we saw, the girl picking the fruit, right, the voice of the devil, that's a figure that appears in half a dozen different Gauguin works, in the exact same pose. Right? Why does he repeat her in the same pose? Because he sees meaning there that he's not done with yet, that he needs to rework to squeeze out the rest of it, you know? I'm trying to think of a good example, like a ghost print from a monotype, you know? There's some ink left. I don't want to waste it. I don't want to pull it out. I want to pull it back out. Squeezing a lemon to get every little bit out when you're doing a recipe or something like that, right? Or even taking the zest off the lemon as well to get that much more lemon flavor. He's reworking these things in order to get all of the information he can out of it. This was up in Baltimore Museum of Art, right? Just up the hill a bit, up 95. reworked that same theme. The subtitle, however, suggests something of memory of Biskra took place in North Africa. He had taken a trip to North Africa in 1906, and it seems to have had a huge effect on him. As we're talking about the joy of life, I showed you nothing but works from Western art, right? I showed you nothing but Greek, Renaissance, Baroque, neoclassical things. But Matisse is also equally interested in non-Western art, particularly African art. And he's also, we'll find out eventually, very much interested in Islamic art as well. Because he's looking for those things that make us human, and us is not limited to the people of Europe, right? Us for him, it's us. It's what it should be. It's global. And he's gone to Africa already before doing this, to North Africa, particularly to Morocco, and he'd also begun to collect African art. I don't think this is from his collection, but I just wanted to bring in a representative example of the sorts of things that Matisse was collecting. I couldn't find anything on exactly what he owned, right? But he's getting these wooden statues that emphasize hips, right, tighten at the knees, that he's bringing some of those stylistic elements into his paintings that have body parts that seem independent from the rest of the body on a certain level, like the arms modeled separately from the torso, or the head is on the normally long neck. And here we can see the rib cage, for example, underneath the breast down here. It seems to almost detached from the body, right, and exists separate from it. And I think it's those sorts of things that he's getting from looking at African art, beginning with this huge trip to North Africa in 1906. And again, it's all part of this attempt to find something primal, something universal and eternal and widespread about human artistic experience, and bringing it all into his work. Right? For him, his work is the repository for all these things. There's one other major influence when it comes to looking outside of Western traditions for inspiration in his art, and that is the Ethnographic Museum in Paris, which had opened back in the 1870s, but had become kind of run down. Here's the interior of the Ethnographic Museum at the Trocadero. The Trocadero is that plateau. Okay, who's been to Paris? If you're looking at the Eiffel Tower from the Champ de Mars, and you're standing in that big field, and there's the Eiffel Tower, the Montmartre, and on the other side of that tower is the Seine, and just on the other side of that is this slight hill. And that was the site of many different world exhibitions, work fairs and whatnot, right? And we'll see one from 1937 when the Nazis and Stalin, shall I say, was there in 1937 to show off. And the Eiffel Tower was part of one of these exhibitions. It was never meant to be a permanent structure. It was a temporary structure to show off industry. But right across from there was this place called the Trocadero Museum. It was torn down in the 20s, I think. But and now it's a big plaza, right? But the museum was there from 1878 onward, and in the early 20th century, the first decade of the 20th century, they started cleaning it up because it really fallen into disrepair, and they started buying new things, and it became one of those things where it's on people, like the Renwick right now just reopened. Everybody goes down to see those bugs, you know. But the point is, it's on people's radar screen because it had been closed for a while and falling apart. Now it's not anymore, right? So in addition to collecting works of art and going down to North Africa, Matisse had stuff right here in Paris that he could go see at the Troc, at the Musée Ethnographique, is what it was called, right? And what the Ethnographic Museum did was the exact same thing Matisse was trying to do, which is to try to trace the lineage from cradle to grave of everything mankind has ever done insofar as making images. Right? So it brought in, and not just European, from all over. So it brought in not only the artifacts we made, but also diorama figures they could dress up, as you can see in the photo on your right. But what's fascinating is that they also had these casts of prominent architectural monuments. So Up at the middle, that's Vézelay. The Church of San Magdalene is Vézelay, which you might remember from intro class, where Christ is sending out the apostles. Right? This is look, that's Chartres Cathedral here. Right? But it's a full plastic cast. And then down below we have Egyptian, Greek, right? More Greek over here. And it's sort of a rain in this building as they talk about drawing these connections. Exactly what the teacher should have listed. So it gives them another outlet to find non-Westerners, but it also can give them this inspiration for coming up with this amazing idea of distilling into a single image the entirety of human activity, right? And not only the artistic activity, but activity. It's all here. I'm wrong, by the way, that's WhatsApp. And it's not there anymore. Those things called the Moods of different museums. They kept the cast thing when they tore the building down. But you can see that even the building's a semicircle, so you just walk your way through this huge sweep. Yeah? Right. That goes one way, and then behind it is the sand, and that plaza was meant to connect it to the stroke on the other side as part of this big exhibition space, right? And in fact, that big plaza was actually a huge covered. It was called the Gallery of the Machine, which is all about machine crafting and whatnot. Right? So again, I think this really helps to really put a nice context for what Matisse is doing in The Joy of Life, which is to try to give us this sweep of human activity and everything that they've ever done into a single picture, just as the Trocadero Museum tried to put everything into a single museum, which were still there. It's really cool, right? There's one of these, if you go to London, the Victoria and Albert Museum has something kind of similar to that, a room just full of casts of everything in one room just jumbled together. It's really pretty cool. Yeah. And see Donatello right next to bronze doors from Pisa. It's great. Well, now we're going to shift over to Germany and the Expressionists in Germany. And in particular, we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on Ernst Ludwig Kirchner in Germany. Now, these two are opposite sides of the same picture. It's painted on panel, and so on one side is the yellow, and you turn it over, on the other side is the multicolored reddish one, right? And I've got some nice details to show you of this. When we were talking about France, well, one thing we saw was that it had one major art center, that there was Paris, right? And when people wanted to escape the city, they would go to smaller areas, but none of them were really major art centers. They thought it might have worked in Aix-en-Provence and Van Gogh in Arles, Gauguin up in Brittany, but none of those were really an art center. Paris was the art center. However, in Germany, it was very different. There were numerous places that were hotbeds of art making at the end of the 19th and the early 20th century. And Kirchner is in the city of Dresden in Germany. Sets up shop there. Eventually he'll move to Berlin, the metropolis of Germany, but he begins in the city of Dresden and spends most of the first decade of the 20th century working there. A bit of background, and then we'll talk about what he's trying to do here with these works. Kirchner had a degree in engineering. He had no artistic training. Right? He was an engineer. And as he turned to art, he did so with an attempt to capitalize on the fact that he didn't have artistic training. And he even wrote about it. He said he wanted his works to look clumsy. He wanted his works to look awkward. That he wanted to show off his lack of training. We'll talk about why in just a second. But that said, do these figures seem awkward to you? Clumsy. If so, how? Right. Those elbows don't, I can't do it. Right? Somehow, the top of the body looks like it's facing it, even though she doesn't have breasts, but you can still see her shoulder blade, but those arms, you can't. You just can't do that, can you? And so she's facing away from us, but she's not, it's just anatomically incorrect, right? With your studio prop, your life drawing prop, your studio drawing prop, slap you upside the head for that, right? Okay, so we had some anatomical issues. What else do we have that's awkward here, or clumsy? There's no perspective, and what perspective there is, it doesn't work. It violates the senses. Right? So somehow we didn't talk about it from the teeth, right? We did, but we talked about it in positive terms. But with the new figure on the right, you can see that the background has some sense of space. But there's just this big black square and a small blue bit there. And then the two women, the two nudes on the left, one is sitting down, the other one's standing, but the application of the color is so strong that you really can't make out a sense of space. All you get is maybe from the direction of the feet. And even that is a bit awkward. It's almost like they're standing on their heels, with their toes in the air because the bend at the ankle is so severe. What about the color choices, especially the one on the left? Does that bother you at all? Jarring, isn't it? I mean, it's really, and in fact, a lot of people said, well, maybe he was just looking at Matisse, right? But for Matisse, with the broader planes of color, there's a sense of that harmony that comes through the pairings. But here it's almost like he's gotten his fingers into that green paint and dabbed them on, to the surface to make the dots on the carpet. And the anatomical problems as well. Look at that foot, right? And all of the colors that make up that her left foot, right? Or within, and everything is scumbled on in a really rough, and the other word he used for his work was primitive. Like he wanted it to be maybe he wanted to be a fauve. Maybe he really wanted to be that wild beast in a way, because he's talking about his work as having this sort of primitive clumsiness. Yeah, Amanda? But then I think what's interesting about it is that after a while you start to fall into it, and you start to kind of like, but the blues are really lovely in themselves, Yeah. And we've seen, going back to Gauguin, how artists are divorcing color from observation, right? And this is why we have to start there. Right? Because that's really where we begin to see, or with Van Gogh, where we start to see color. In fact, Van Gogh's a really good touch point for Kierkegaard as well, in that same sense of really thick paint laid on the surface, where, again, we can talk about this interest in modern art of the artist wanting you to appreciate it as an object rather than a subject matter. When you become look at the paint. At a certain point, the paint, it starts to look tasty almost, It looks like ice cream or flavored butter or something like that. Sorry? I don't know funfetti, but I'll take your word on it. Yeah. There's probably something about it that not a very academic word, but it's yummy. I've got more details here too, so we can see. Everywhere we look, it's something about it that's really rough and almost random in its application. That is exactly what he's aiming for, he said. Right? By the way, when the National Gallery shows this, they always show this side. I've never seen the other side. I don't have to download that picture. Sorry?
Okay, so right here you can see it, right on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like she has eyes on top, and then right on her back on the left. She also looks like she has these hollowed out.
Yeah. Well, these are those dimples you sometimes see.
Yeah, but they're not.
I know. You're exactly right. And you can even see it in this detail, the degree to which the paint is placed. So I don't think he knows what he's doing insofar as as working fat on lean with his tape. Because look at the crack pattern of that. It's like a fairly holding on to the canvas. Because I think he's emphasizing the degree to which it's cool. And here, with the detail, once you dive into the detail, you start to see also that he's not really modulating things to give us a sense of in front of and in back. That the paint on her back, the woman with the back to this, is probably very similar to the paint on the stomach and the thigh. Only ever so slightly darker. Right? So again, it's emphasizing roughness, and some of the color combinations are just plain different. Right? Like I said, you can at a certain point begin to sort of get the mood for it, but Kirchner is this interesting artist in that, and I think this is what makes him a very important artist as well. Is that he raises this question about whether or not art has to be beautiful to be art, or how do you define that? And I can, if you know your way around some later people will get to, people like de Kooning, Willem de Kooning, expressionist painter, post-Advent painter, similar color schemes, and just really difficult. Remember Dr. Kovach going to see a retrospective of de Kooning, and his daughter is kind of 10 or something. So are these supposed to be ugly? You know? And I think that with Kirchner, he said so. He said he wanted them to be primitive. He wanted them to be difficult. And I think this is part of what I hope that would lead modern art, understanding that you don't have to like it to investigate it. It doesn't have to be beautiful to be interesting and worthwhile discussing. And on some level, this goes back to an idea that was very strong during the Enlightenment, which I don't have in my slides to then reform it. But the idea of the sublime. Remember this from last semester, right? You were in last semester. Those of you who were in last semester. The idea of the sublime, as articulated in aesthetics, the sublime does not mean the extremely beautiful. It has to be how we use it now. Just this side of, orgasmic, right? But sublime is something that gave you a very strong aesthetic reaction. Something that you couldn't be complacent about. That really inspired a strong reaction. And was usually used in things like images of horror, death, dismemberment. Because they inspired such a strong aesthetic reaction on the part of the viewer. And that if the aesthetic reaction is the thing that we care about the most, if actually have a reaction to something, then should those things be as good as the extremely beautiful? Shouldn't those things be as valuable? And I think on a certain level, Kirchner is tapping into a sublime aesthetic. I don't know what things sublime means. Sublime aesthetic, where it is purposefully unpracticed. Yeah, that's
so ugly, beautiful.
Yeah, and the idea is that you can't, it's so ugly you can't take your eyes off it, right? Why do people slow down for car wrecks? Why do we like the Rapids of Medusa by Jericho? It's horrific. Another nice detail, though, just so we can look at the paint, because it really is very much about the surface, and it becomes very much about the painting as an object. But again, those colors are just spectacular in and of themselves, right? And when we look at it this way, we can see that here in the early 20th century, we're really not very far away from depicting clothes like this. We're not very far away from Jackson Pollock. There's something about it that seems kind of random and, just jumped onto the canvas without a whole lot of forethought. And for Kirchner, lacking academic training, right, lacking artistic training, wanting to champion that and to say, I'm going to embrace my shortcomings and turn them into something that actually becomes kind of interesting and as we'll talk more about this in just a second, but interesting and full of meaning as well, right? Now, this idea that he's going to turn his back on academic training, he's going to look for something primitive, right? It's one of the words uses, primitive, primal. But it was all Matisse too, isn't it? Trying to figure out that there's something there that we can see that throughout all of human existence. We go back to the Garden of Eden. And a lot of that is all over modern art. And I think it stems from a dissatisfaction with the status quo. That you've got to find something there, you've got to find something different. Now, obviously, there are people who influence Kierkegaard. When we look at the way he's put the paint on the surface, the lines of paint and the thick uses of unnaturalistic colors, Van Gogh comes immediately to mind. Although Van Gogh much more realistic and much more well academically trained with a stronger sense of three-dimensionality and structure than Kierkegaard, but still, I think we could draw a connection between the two of them. And something we haven't looked at that will come up in one of the 10-minute art fixes is Edvard Munch as well. A German expressionist, he's Norwegian, but he moved to Berlin right around this time, as a matter of fact. And again, even though this is much thinner in the paint application, you can see that same sense of sort of difficulty, right? It's a hard picture to enjoy. I'm not saying it's a hard picture to like, I'm saying it's a hard picture to enjoy. And that's where we might separate the two things, right? It's not about enjoyment. Now, as we talk about Kierkegaard, I want to another Munch from the National Gallery, because I love the way that their hair sort of melds together into one big amorphous form, and I think that's something that Kierkegaard could have easily learned from looking at works by Munch. And here, when we were just talking about Matisse and the embracing figures in the foreground, and how I said it really wasn't violent, they're kind of melting into each other. What's that song from Valley Girl, I Melt With You? I lost the world, I melt with you. Okay, well this ain't that, man. He's eating it. In fact, calls it the vampire to give you that sense of sort of a fear of intimacy. Matisse had none of that, right? But the reason I have this is for two things. One, the idea of these two figures sort of melding together. Look what happens with their two faces. You almost can see nothing of the cheeks and the nose of the woman with her back to us. But the hair becomes this big wild thing that binds the two of them together. And I think that's something we picked up from looking at Munch as well. So this is expressionism in a way, right? For Kierkegaard, the expressiveness of the paint application trumps everything else. And for him, he finds that expressiveness in a sort of primitivism, right? An embrace of a non-academic approach to painting and an embrace of sort of rough and primitive approach to making art. There are other expressionists from this time. Before we dive into Kierkegaard more deeply, Judy Kollwitz, our first woman artist, we see expressionism all over Germany in the first decade, and it takes very different forms. But usually it's about this kind of sublime art that is difficult to enjoy, but often stunningly beautiful and often deeply moving. So Kollwitz is in a different town. She's in Berlin, and she gives us numerous images. She's working as an engraver. She gives us numerous images that show us the scene of the mother embracing her dead child. And certainly these are inspired by the tradition of Western images of the Virgin Mary holding the lifeless body of Christ after the crucifixion. But she melds it with something else. She makes it more timeless, more universal, like that. And focuses instead entirely on the grief of the subject. Certainly by making it a dead child rather than a dead adult, makes it even that much sadder. What is, I said this before in the class, but what is sadder? than outliving your children. I mean, what could be sadder than that? Than having to bury your own child, and have to watch your own children die. I can't imagine. I don't have kids. I can't imagine what would be sadder than that. She captures it. There's the pale body of the young man, utterly wrapped up, almost like an octopus by his mother, who is so grief-stricken she wants to almost pull him back into herself, like she's trying to take him back into the womb so she can keep him safe. And both the arms and the legs just wrap around him. You don't even hardly see the face of this poor mother as she weeps over the child. This is based entirely on her experience. She had married a doctor in Berlin who specialized in helping the poor, attending to the poor, right? I don't know what's a good modern analogy, but worked for the people who couldn't afford to pay it. So she was always surrounded by grieving mothers with children who are sick simply from malnutrition. This is what her husband treated. And she said that this has really had an impact on her work. But that's what she was trying to get at, with some of the grief that she experienced because of her husband's practice. She also had brothers and sisters who died as youths. So there's a personal side to it as well. This morning, she wants to focus on that as something that's not unique to a single individual, but something that we all can feel. This one is in your textbook, and there's an impression of it at the National Gallery, where again we see a woman embracing a dead infant, her arm around its neck, the cheeks brought to his face, and this is a self-portrait of Coleridge herself. Those heavy lower eyelids of Katie Coleridge herself and those thick lips. And then in the upper left corner, you can see just past the body of the infant, you can see there's a skull up there as well, just here. You can see the nose and the eyes looking to your left in the skull. Again, that very same theme. In a way, this is oddly prophetic. Within 5 years, her own son would die in the war, in World War I. And she'll continue this theme after the war with much more personal resonance. So what this shows us is that expressionism is everywhere in Germany, right? And it takes on different phases. Kirchner has one direction, Coleridge is in a different direction, but they're both focusing on sort of an emotive expressiveness and focusing on that beyond other elements of the composition. Going back to Kirchner, in Dresden, in 1905, he got together with a number of other artists and he founded a group, an artistic movement. And they had a manifesto. One of the other artists is Emil Nolde. Sorry, this is a bad introduction. But I think he's working with some of the same models as Kirchner is. They called themselves the Bridge, Die Brücke in German, the Bridge. And Nolde was part of this, joined them very soon. It didn't last very long. I don't think Kirchner was all to East on that, as we'll see. Right? But in that first year, in 1905, 1906, the group was really tight-knit. They did everything together. They were like an artist's colony. You ever read about these? I thought this was kind of fun, to join an artist's colony. You know? Where you're just going to get together and bounce ideas off each other and make works of art together and work elbow to elbow for... Is Mariner kind of like that? Or it can be that. I'm just seeing that in the studio. You know? You can feel that way, right? But they would come together in Kirchner's studio, draw together from the same model. They travel together as well, right? They take group trips everywhere. They became this really tight-knit group. And all of them focused on making art like Kirchner's was, which is something that is unsophisticated, non-academic, primitive, right? Unschooled. And while the art intends to be that, the ideas that are driving that choice are really sophisticated. Right? Why make an art that is this simple? And one could just give a knee-jerk thing, like I've already said. You're trying to get back to something that's primal about being human, that goes back to the birth of civilization, the dawn of civilization. Okay, well and good. But they actually gave it a philosophical stand. They actually said, well, this relates to some very deep ideas. The name Die Berufe comes out of Friedrich Nietzsche, who had written this book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. All of those brought to Zarathustra. Right? Zarathustra was another way of saying Zoroaster from Zoroastrianism, right? The pre-Christian god of light, going back to ancient Mesopotamia. There was the god of light and the god of darkness. There was Zoroaster. Remember who the god of darkness was. Anyway, they were constantly at war. Light versus darkness, right? And Nietzsche uses that myth, that very ancient myth, to discuss evolution. Something that Nietzsche calls our will to power. In other words, our striving to become better. Okay? So that the title, all of those thus Zarathustra, is all about our ongoing evolution. And what Nietzsche says basically is he acknowledges Darwin and says that we have evolved from savages to the civilization we enjoy today. But what Nietzsche says in this and other works is that it would be stupid to think we're done evolving. Why do we assume that this is it? How can we be so, cocksure to be absolutely sure that this is it? Shouldn't, just as we evolved from there to here, shouldn't we think maybe in 10,000 years we'll look back and see that that was only halfway home? To where we might be in 10,000 more years? That's what I'm talking about, right? Okay. And it's all caused, this evolution, by our will to power. This is something that the evolution is something we are determining ourselves. Now this is Nietzsche in a nutshell. Nietzsche in a nutshell. I didn't mean to say that. But, so it's much more complicated than this. Right? But what Nietzsche says eventually is that we are going to keep evolving. That we're going to evolve into a race of Superman. This is way before Superman became, right? That we're going to evolve into a race of Superman by modern standards. The word we use was Übermensch, right? And eventually we're going to get to Übermensch. But what Nietzsche says is that these evolutionary connections are bridges. That there is a bridge back to our savage past. And there will be a bridge forward to our Übermensch future, our Superman future. And the only way that we're ever going to continue to exert our will to power and get there, because it's up to us to get there, to this next evolutionary stage, the only way we're going to get that is if we recognize the bridge to the past. Until we recognize that we were once savages, and once we do that, then we can actually get to the Superman stage. Right? So this is what Kirchner and Nolden, the members of Kirchner is the driving force behind this. So this is why he wants his art to be primitive. He wants us to recognize our primitive past, even in the modern world. That we have come out of something primitive and savage. And only when we recognize that can we possibly get to the Superman stage. Now, I need to tell you this. This all sounds all well and good, but Nietzsche also thought it was only good for white people, and only good for men as well, because Hitler loved Nietzsche, right? He was going to try and arrange that whole thing with the Aryan race, right? He's going to physically arrange it. This stuff is terribly fascist. There's only a few people that could make it to Superman, and he knew who they were, you know. Like, it's not democratic at all, right? It's not for everybody. It's a few brilliant people. Right? So anyway, I'm saying that so you don't go out thinking he just all that. Just he ain't, you know, in the long run. In fact, I think he was behind a lot of evil that happened in this 20th century. These very ideas we're talking about. But for art, the idea is that, okay, we want to make progress. And for Kierkegaard, I don't think it was fascistic. I think what he's saying is that, well, kind of. His images of women are kind of deprecated. But suffice to say that I think for many of these early 20th century artistic movements, the idea of improving society was in fact one of their motivations. If Hitler takes Nietzsche and goes evil with it, Kierkegaard says, hey, society has become a better place. Right? The modern world can really become modern if we accept this primitive path. Then we can move forward. We as a group. So, like I said, even though the work itself strives to be childish, childlike, simple, primitive, the ideas are really complicated, right? They're really sort of sophisticated in a way that's different from the works themselves, right? So, primitive art for the group De Brugge reveals our savage past, right? The brutal style becomes the bridge so that we can form a bridge out of where we are into our destiny, right? Our better destiny. Love this picture, actually, guys. It's beautiful. One of the things that Kierkegaard did, in addition to sort of making things primitively drawn, you know, this is a few years later, you start to paint enough and you start to get good at it. You know what I mean? He starts to get better with his sense of structure and eventually with anatomy as well, even though he's trying to hold himself back. But in addition to sort of the primitive nature of art paint application, the other thing is, of course, these very unrealistic colors. And we saw some hint of that with the nudes that we looked at before, but as we look at this dance hall in Dresden, named the Bellevue Dance Hall, you'll notice that every section of it picks up a different color tonality, and none of it is realistic. Again, maybe it's the lesson of Van Gogh. Think about the night cafe, right? Maybe it's Gauguin. But for Kierkegaard, the point is that you get separated from reality on a certain level. Because once you get that separation from the world around you, then you can see more clearly how to put that behind you, how to move forward. This is kind of a utopianism, right? That a lot of artists in the early 20th century are focusing on this idea that the world is increasingly chaotic and messy and hold us back from achieving what we really want to achieve. And if we can somehow put that behind us, the world that we're familiar with, the world that we're comfortable in, if we can put that behind us, we have a chance to do something, that we're not held back anymore by things we assume to be true, and things that make us comfortable. And so for Kierkegaard, even though it's recognizable, street, right, railing, people on the street walking, church behind that dance hall, tree on the left, blah, 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 blah. Even though it's recognizable, the colors divorce us, shakes us out of that fact that we need to be looking for something else. And I've got a nice detail or two here, also so we can see the surface of the canvas as well. Again, very simply rendered often. Look at that beautiful, that downspout on the side of the orange wall, where he's actually taken it, this bit right here. I'm trying, maybe let's do my finger right in there. Doesn't work at all on that, does it? Because it's the wrong color, but you get the idea that certain parts of it are very, very simply drawn, or even that the bush down over here, where it's come back with black around the outside. manner. Another view here of the street itself, and again, we can see how roughly and quickly the paint is switching. But it's all about trying to get us to this bridge, if you will. Bridging to the past, remember, and bridging to the future. Now, I think we'll end with this one. You might be asking yourself, well, how does Matisse work into all of this, right? The colors are similar to Matisse's colors. The divorce from representation in those colors is something similar to Matisse. I think the difference is that Kierkegaard wants us to be unsettled. Kierkegaard wants to shake us. Matisse wants to comfort us. He even says, I gave you that quote last time, that I want my paintings to be like a comfortable armchair. He even said a comfortable old armchair. Aren't they the best kind? The kind that you sat in enough that your butt fits it perfectly, The ones that I used to call them like sleep machines. If you sit down, there's no chance you're ever going to read more than a page and a half, right? We used to have a couch I was sure was possessed with exactly that capacity, right? For Matisse, Rouge Comme et Volupté was based on this poem that talked about everything as order and beauty. What Kierkegaard wants is discord. So he can show us our savage legacy, so he can shake us free from the present. That's not what Matisse is trying to do. That said, everybody looked at Kierkegaard and said, aren't you just doing what Matisse did a few years ago? Okay? Look at your colors. Look at what's different here insofar as the actual composition itself. What's different here? And certainly I think Kierkegaard had been looking at Matisse. But he hated that people made the connection. He's kind of a jerk this way. In fact, he went back after people kept saying, looks like Matisse, looks like Matisse, looks like Matisse. He went back and painted over the dates on a lot of his pictures, so it looked like he did it first. Even though in the diaries and everything, it was easy to prove that he didn't, right? But still, he was hoping to try to show people that I'm the innovator, Matisse copied me, right? So he predated it. He even went back and wrote a history of Die Brücke, where he said we started in 1903, and that would put it before the Fauve show, right? Instead of 1905, which is the same year as the Fauve show, right? So it's, he's a bit of an ego trip that way. And by the way, he was a bit of a blowhard. When he wrote about his art, he talked about himself in the first person or the third person. Well, Kierkegaard and in 1905, Kierkegaard did this, right? So take it all with a grain of salt. Okay, that's a good place to stop. We will wrap up Kierkegaard here. I'll be putting some other things up online with him and with others soon. Remember, no class on Friday because I've got these interviews to do down at the conference. I have to find you guys a good new professor of drawing, and I will be emailing you about that. Do try to make an appointment to come and see me about your research papers. That's the word I wanted.